The air had already stolen the last of the warmth from Gabriella's lungs, but it was the frantic scrape of the chain link against her knuckles that measured her remaining time. Her breath plumed white and shallow as she pulled the thick, canvas coat, her only shield against the bitter winter, tighter around the small, shivering pink bundle that was Eugene. Gabriella didn't act for money or reward, but because the child, the Mafia boss's daughter, was starting to grow terrifyingly still. Her coat, smelling faintly of the fish market, was now a fortress against the snow that whipped past the fence, protecting the girl while leaving Gabriella exposed to the biting cold. The world was a deadly canvas of white, broken only by the shocking pink of the child's dress and the sharp, black geometry of the sedan, its door flung open. Then, Kim Min-yu arrived. The Mafia boss, his dark suit a contradiction against the snow, stopped dead 10 feet away. He did not rush to his daughter. His gaze was locked not on the child, but on the empty space where the maid's coat should have been. A cold silence fell, broken only by the wind. Min-yu's command was low, absolute, and entirely unexpected. "You're not leaving her side, Gabriella." Not for a moment. In that breath, the price for her sacrifice was paid, her old life was stripped away, and she was bound forever to his empire. The black sedan, now sealed against the blizzard, was not a place of safety but a moving vault. Min-yu hadn't spoken another word since his command, merely retrieving his phone to issue quick, low directives in Korean. Gabriella, shivering in her thin work clothes while the heavy, sacred canvas lay draped over a now sleeping Yejin, understood this much: the sacrifice of her coat had not earned her freedom, but a new, terrible form of debt. 48 hours later, Gabriella stood in a vast, cold kitchen that dwarfed her former world. The immediate aftermath had been surgically precise. Her small, run-down apartment was emptied, her terrified mother and younger brother relocated to a clean, well-furnished flat in a nondescript building across town, complete with a generous, recurring cash stipend. Her family was safe. Her debt was paid, to them. But she was not with them. Min-yu had kept his word that she would not leave Yejin's side, transforming her from a general maid into the child's exclusive personal attendant. The estate was a monolith of steel and glass, sprawling across acres, utterly silent save for the hum of its sophisticated security. It was a gilded cage, and Gabriella was its newest, reluctant resident. She was given a pristine uniform, not the rags of a common house cleaner, but the crisp, bespoke black of a private attendant, and a small, sterile room connected to Yejin's suite. Yejin, still recovering from the trauma of the storm and the escape, clung to Gabriella with the fierce possessiveness of a frightened animal. She refused to eat unless Gabriella sat beside her, refused to sleep unless the maid was in the adjacent room. To the child, Gabriella was warmth and safety. To the rest of the silent, uniformed staff who glided through the hallways, Gabriella was a sudden, strange imposition, the woman who had appeared from the snow, favored by the boss. Min-yu watched them both. He never interacted with Gabriella casually. His encounters were brief, usually in the sterile white halls, his eyes assessing her, her diligence, her patience with Yejin, the way she moved through the wealth that now surrounded her without touching it. She had exchanged the brutal cold of poverty for the isolating cold of power. She was no longer hungry, but she was trapped, her anonymity sacrificed for the child's safety and her family's comfort. Her humble life was gone, replaced by a luxurious prison where her worth was measured entirely by her loyalty to the Mafia boss's daughter. The silence of the estate was heavy, scented with expensive wood polish and the sterile, metallic ozone of sophisticated air purification. This was the gold-plated prison, and Gabriella found that her role as Yejin's personal attendant meant occupying the quiet eye of a very dangerous storm. The trauma of the escape had fundamentally altered the Mafia boss's daughter. She was now utterly dependent. Yejin, the child of immense power and wealth, slept only when her small hand was resting on Gabriella's own, and her sudden tears could only be calmed by the maid's hushed, Spanish lullabies, a music utterly foreign to the mansion's walls. Gabriella was her anchor, the one warm, constant thing in a life violently fractured by the world her father ruled. Minyu remained a distant, imposing figure, yet his awareness of Gabriella had become unnerving. He was not observing her out of attraction or simple gratitude, but with the cold, clinical focus of a predator evaluating a new tool. His encounters were never accidents. He would appear in the doorway of Yejin's massive playroom, his suit immaculate against the chaos of expensive, untouched toys, and watch their routine. He observed Gabriella's diligence, how she managed Yejin's outbursts with quiet strength, and the natural care that flowed between them, a commodity Minyu understood the value of, but could never manufacture. He was calculating her worth beyond the single, generous act of kindness. He was measuring her reliability. "You do not fear her," he stated one evening, standing near the glass wall of the solarium where Gabriella was supervising Yejin's dinner. Gabriella did not flinch or look away from the child. "I do not fear children, Mr. Minyu. Only men who make them afraid." His gaze did not waver, but a flicker of something unreadable, not anger, perhaps curiosity, crossed his eyes. He saw that her courage was not fleeting, it was the bedrock of her character. He was recognizing that the maid, who sought no reward and asked for nothing, was the only truly incorruptible person inside his walls. In the heart of his empire, surrounded by men bought by fear or money, he was discovering that Gabriella Silva's innate moral compass was a unique, powerful, and potentially indispensable asset. He was done testing her loyalty, now, he was calculating how to use her strength. The transition from general household staff to Yejin's personal attendant had granted Gabriella access to the deepest workings of the estate, not less. Though the other maids and security men treated her with a cool deference born of Minyu's favor, they also treated her with the fundamental dismissiveness reserved for the help. It was this ingrained invisibility that Gabriella instinctively learned to weaponize. She moved through the mansion like a ghost, her footsteps silent on the marble floors, her observations sharp and constant. She noticed small inconsistencies in the household staff's routines. The kitchen rotation had subtly changed, placing the same 3 non-Korean-speaking men in the West Wing service hall during Yejin's afternoon nap window. Their low conversations were too quick, too guarded, and punctuated by phrases she didn't recognize, a secret language woven into the background noise of the estate. The security sweep schedule, taped discreetly in the head butler's pantry, had been altered last week, creating a new, 5-minute blind spot near the solarium at midnight. These were the clues of the unseen, information only available to the person whose job required them to know where every towel was folded and every silver tray was placed. The rising tide of her suspicion crested one Tuesday afternoon when Minyu's consigliere, Lee Jinwoo, stopped her outside Yejin's playroom. Jinwoo was an older man, polished and deadly, who usually looked through her, as if she were made of air. "The girl is napping now, I presume?" he asked, his smile too wide and too familiar. "She is resting, sir," Gabriella replied, keeping her voice even. "Good. Good. She is always so quiet when she reads her Sleeping Beauty in the afternoon, isn't she? A lovely, predictable routine." The detail struck Gabriella cold. Yejin hadn't read Sleeping Beauty in a week, favoring a loud, dog-eared graphic novel about a pirate cat. Jinwoo would only know the old routine from outdated intelligence, or from someone who had meticulously studied the child's habits weeks ago. That single, overly familiar comment about Yejin's schedule, delivered with such an unsettling air of confidence, ripped the illusion of safety from the gold-plated prison. Gabriella gripped the doorknob, her invisibility failing her for the first time as a single, terrifying thought formed: Jinwoo was watching, not protecting. He knew Yejin's routine too well. The maid's selfless act had saved the girl from the cold, but now it was her unwanted proximity that was placing them both in the center of a much greater, internal betrayal. The certainty delivered by Jinwoo's misplaced familiarity was a weight Gabriella could no longer carry alone. For 2 days, she moved with quiet desperation, her eyes scanning the elaborate security cameras and the faces of the silent staff, knowing the threat was no longer outside the fence, but deep within the walls. Her chance came late one night, after Minyu had left the estate for what the staff termed a routine meeting and Yejin was finally asleep. Following a flickering light in the West Wing service hall, the very area she had noticed the rotational changes, Gabriella found a utility room slightly ajar. Inside, two of the non-Korean security men she had observed were speaking in fast, hushed tones over a glowing tablet. She flattened herself against the cold marble, relying completely on the training poverty had given her, the ability to be utterly still, utterly invisible. She didn't understand the exact dialect, but the names were chillingly clear. Lee Jinwoo. The word for seize or take. And then, the location, the charity gala. The context, the quick, nervous gestures pointing to a blueprint of the estate's main ballroom, confirmed everything. Lee Jinwoo was the viper in Minyu's nest, and he was planning to seize Yejin during the upcoming political and social event. The whisper of their betrayal echoed in her mind long after the men had locked the door and left. The midpoint revelation hit her with the sickening force of an unavoidable collision. She knew too much. If she went to Minyu, she risked everything. Her family's new, safe apartment, the money for her brother's education, the promise of stability, all of it depended on Minyu's controlled environment. Lee Jinwoo, seeing his plans compromised, would surely reach out and crush the smallest threat, which meant crushing her family. But if she remained silent, Yejin dies. The little girl, who clung to her hand and whispered her fears in the dark, would be used as a bargaining chip, destroyed by the very wealth that surrounded her. Gabriella looked down at her own trembling hands, no longer smeared with cleaning products, but wrapped in the fine, soft cotton of Yejin's blanket. She had to choose between the safety she had earned for her blood, and the life of the child whose warmth she had saved in the snow. Her only coat had been a simple sacrifice. This decision was a potential execution for them all. She straightened her uniform, turned her gaze toward the main office, and began walking toward the boss. Minyu's office was minimalist and severe, its only warmth coming from the distant city lights visible through the panoramic window. He stood facing the glass when Gabriella entered, his posture a study in controlled aggression. She did not curtsy or offer an apology for the late hour. She simply placed the cryptic evidence, the altered security sweep schedule, the note detailing the abnormal kitchen staff rotation, and the date of the gala, on his polished mahogany desk. He listened without interruption, as she recounted Jinwoo's overly familiar comment, and the terrifying whisper she'd overheard. Initially, his expression was a mask of cold skepticism, the arrogance of a man who trusted his own network above a maid's eavesdropping. He picked up the schedule and gave it a cursory glance. Staff rotas change, Gabriella. People talk. They changed the rota to put 3 men, who do not speak Korean near Yejin's wing at the same time, sir, she countered, her voice low but steady. And Lee Jinwoo knew the details of her former routine better than the current one. He is looking backward to find a weakness, not forward. Minyu's skepticism dissolved into a sharp, predatory calculation. He looked at her then, not as a maid, but as an oracle who had delivered doom. He knew her intelligence was dangerous, and he had to manage it. You will be paid, he stated, his voice flat. Your family will be moved again, secured overseas if you wish. Gabriella shook her head. Money is temporary, Mr. Minyu. My silence is permanent, and my help is indispensable. I ask for more than money. She took a deep breath, the fear solidifying into absolute resolve. I want full, documented protection for my family's future. Not just safety now, but contracts, funds, and legal assurances that secure my brother's education and my mother's health, forever, regardless of your fate or mine. The demand was audacious, a challenge to his absolute control. Minyu's lips tightened, recognizing the true cost of her courage. He saw she wasn't asking to be saved. She was trading the one asset he valued, unseen loyalty, for eternal security. After a long, tense silence, Minyu picked up a pen. You will sign a non-disclosure. You will follow every instruction I give you. And you will risk everything. He met her eyes, the dangerous alliance confirmed. In exchange, the paperwork will be drawn up. The contracts are your payment, Gabriella. You just traded safety for power. The Maid and the Mafia boss had sealed their tense, morally grey partnership. The gold-plated prison had just gained its first and most unlikely operative. The planning sessions took place late at night, in the severe quiet of Minyu's office, far from Eugene's wing. It was here, tracing lines on the estate's floor plans, that the tense, morally grey partnership truly solidified. Minyu expected precision, Gabriella offered visibility. Jinwoo will use the service tunnels under the West Wing kitchens, Minyu stated, tapping a section of the blueprint. They offer the quickest, most protected egress to the perimeter fence. The service tunnel exit opens directly behind the main linen storage room, Gabriella counted immediately, her finger pointing to a specific corner. The lock on the linen room door is electronic, but the latch itself has been sticking for weeks, I reported it 3 times. It can be jammed with a single cleaning wedge. She knew the estate better than the architect, better than the security detail, she knew its flaws, its unmonitored corners, the blind spots where staff gathered to smoke or complain. Her knowledge, born of routine invisibility, was their greatest weapon. Minyu watched her, his expression shifting from calculation to a cold, genuine respect. She was not just a pair of eyes, she was a tactical asset. He recognized that her poverty had made her an expert in survival and observation, skills he usually paid thousands of dollars to acquire. The counterattack needed a ghost. Minyu reached into his desk drawer, pulling out a small, ornate silver brooch, a stylized Korean lotus flower. This is your communication piece, he said, handing her the pin. A simple press activates the microphone, 2 presses sends a distress signal to my secure team. Next, he presented a slender object disguised as a specialized cleaning tool, its handle ergonomic, the tip ending in a sharp, non-metallic ceramic point. This is for defense only. Non-traceable, and quiet. If they corner you, use it. Your safety is now secondary only to Eugene's. Gabriella took the tools. The cold weight of the self-defense weapon felt foreign and terrifying in her hand, so used to brooms and scrubbing pads. She was no longer just trading safety for power, she was trading innocence for survival. The best way to see a ghost is to stop looking for her, Gabriella murmured, examining the brooch. They will be looking for a breach from the outside. They will not be looking for the maid who brings the water. The shared acknowledgement of the plan's danger, the quiet faith Minyu was placing in her unseen knowledge, and the dangerous tools he had given her created a new, intense intimacy between them. They were conspirators now, bound by the life of the child and the threat of the viper in the wall. The coldness between the boss and the maid was slowly being replaced by the taut, essential tension of 2 partners preparing for war. The Minyu estate, usually a tomb of polished silence, had transformed into a shimmering, deafening spectacle for the annual charity gala. Every surface reflected the blinding light of chandeliers and the flash of diamond jewelry. The air, thick with expensive perfumes and champagne, felt stifling to Gabriella, who moved through the throng dressed in the crisp, black uniform of a service attendant. She was the ghost, blending perfectly with the dozen other staff members, her presence registered by no one except the small, hidden earpiece Minyu had provided. West hallway clear, she murmured into the disguised lotus brooch, her voice barely a whisper above the din. She guided Minyu's hidden team, plainclothes security disguised as high-level guests, to the key junction points, leveraging her knowledge of the estate's flow. She was the eyes he couldn't place on the floor, mapping the enemy's positions in real time. Lee Jinwoo, slick in a tailored tuxedo, was an island of unnerving calm amid the glittering chaos. He made his move precisely at the time Gabriella had predicted, just after the main auction started, when attention was fixed on the stage. He approached Yejin, who was seated quietly in a corner drawing under the watchful eye of a temporary guard. Yejin, Jinwoo's voice was warm, dripping with false grandfatherly affection. Your father wanted me to show you a surprise. A game, just for us. It's a treasure hunt. The temporary guard hesitated, but Jinwoo cut him off with a look of withering seniority. The boss asked me to. It's outside, near the fountain. Yejin's eyes, bright with the promise of a game, flickered up. She didn't trust Jinwoo, but she trusted the idea of a secret from her father. Gabriella, who had positioned herself nearby replenishing a champagne flute tower, watched the scene unfold, her hands freezing on the crystal. Go, Yejin, don't resist, she prayed silently. She knew resisting here, in public, would only lead to a violent, immediate extraction. Yejin took Jinwoo's hand, and they walked toward the nearest, least monitored exit, the rear conservatory that led to the service path. He has the asset, Gabriella whispered urgently into her brooch, the terror of exposure spiking her pulse. Conservatory, moving toward the garden path. Code red. Her job was not over. Her primary purpose was now to be the invisible shield. Dropping her tray with a controlled clatter that drew only a few annoyed glances, she melted into the shadows of the service wing. She knew the garden path led directly to the sticking linen room and the service tunnel. The race to the tunnel was on, and only Gabriella could take the secret shortcuts through the estate's back passages to get there first. Gabriella ran, her quiet, rubber-soled shoes barely sounding on the concrete of the service tunnels. She bypassed several locked doors using employee codes she had committed to memory, driven by the absolute certainty that she had to reach the linen room before Jinwoo could get Yejin through the jammed door and into the escape vehicle. Her uniform, once a symbol of servitude, was now the camouflage of an operative. She burst through the final passage door and saw them, Jinwoo holding Yejin's hand, fumbling with the linen room lock, his security backup stationed nearby. Yejin looked confused, not scared yet, but the moment the tunnel door opened, fear would come. Stop, Mr. Jinwoo! Gabriella shouted, her voice echoing in the narrow corridor. Jinwoo froze, then turned, his face contorted in a sneer of pure contempt. He shoved Yejin slightly behind him. The help! Are you lost, girl? Get back to the kitchen. The boss knows, she said, her chest heaving. He knows what you are doing. Jinwoo merely laughed, a short, cruel, dismissive sound. You're wrong, Maid. No one listens to the help. He raised his hand toward her in a gesture of dismissal, but Gabriella was already moving. She lunged past him, not toward Jinwoo, but toward the large, red fire alarm box mounted on the wall. Her years of housekeeping gave her intimate knowledge of this specific corridor. Her ceramic self-defense weapon was not needed. Instead, her hands grabbed the heavy, metal fire extinguisher hanging beside the alarm. With a surge of adrenaline, she simultaneously smashed the fire alarm glass and swung the dense cylinder. The alarm shrieked, instantly plunging the entire section into confusion and triggering the emergency smoke vents. Jinwoo's security detail flinched, their attention divided. Using the distraction, Gabriella whipped the safety pin from the extinguisher and sprayed the chemical foam directly into Jinwoo's face. He staggered back, screaming, blinded and choking. Yejin shrieked, running straight to Gabriella, who pulled the girl tight. Before Jinwoo could recover, the tunnel door burst open. Kim Minyu, his face a mask of terrifying fury, stormed into the corridor, followed by two armed, silent men. Minyu took one look at the blinded, incapacitated Jinwoo, the choking security detail, and the maid shielding his daughter, and his face settled into a terrifying calm. Minyu didn't need to be told what happened. He simply looked at the shivering Gabriella, and the fire extinguisher still smoking in her hands. He gave a sharp, final nod to his men, a gesture that spoke volumes about Jinwoo's fate. Then, he stepped over the humiliated consigliere and focused entirely on the maid. The maid had won the fight. The queen's shield had held. The noise of the emergency alarms finally faded, replaced by the methodical, chilling quiet of Minu's security team clearing the estate and managing the incident. The gala guests had been swiftly and silently ushered out, leaving the mansion spotless, yet vibrating with the violence that had just occurred. Minu found Gabriella sitting on the edge of Yejin's bed, the girl finally asleep, her small face buried in the neck of her savior. Gabriella was exhausted, smeared with fire extinguisher residue, and still clutching the heavy cylinder like a talisman. The fierce energy of the fight had drained away, leaving her body trembling. Minu dismissed the final guard and closed the door, creating a profound silence. He didn't approach her. He simply stood at the foot of the bed, observing the maid and his child, the two most valuable, fiercely protected assets in his life. The cold, calculating distance he had maintained was completely gone, replaced by an expression Gabriella had never seen, a complex mix of debt, respect, and terrifying acknowledgement. Jinwoo is handled, Minu stated, his voice low and absolute. His network is severed. The threat is gone. He moved to his desk and pulled out a stack of documents, the contracts Gabriella had demanded in exchange for her help. He placed them on the nightstand. The documents securing your family's safety and wealth, regardless of my future, are signed, notarized, and untouchable. You fulfilled your contract and you saved my daughter. Your payment is complete. He paused, then looked straight into her weary eyes. This was the moment of the true, shocking aftermath. Now, I offer you a choice that is not on those papers. I can give you and your family a safe, quiet life, untraceable, abroad. You will never want for money, you will never be found. You will return to your anonymity, only now, it will be wrapped in gold. He stepped closer, dominating the space, offering a life that was safe, yet utterly removed from him. Or, he continued, his voice dropping, challenging her. You can stand next to me. Scene. Not as a maid, but as the woman who fought for my child and understands the shadows. You will be my partner, my eyes, the conscience this empire requires. You will have power, but you will never be safe again. Gabriella looked from the documents promising quiet security to the intense, dangerous gaze of the man offering a shared throne built on blood. The safe, anonymous life she once longed for felt suddenly pale and insignificant. She thought of the cold snow, the fight in the tunnel, and the fierce, protective strength she discovered. She was no longer just the poor maid. She was a survivor. She carefully placed the fire extinguisher on the floor, securing the knowledge that she could never return to being unseen. I choose to stay, she stated simply. I choose to be seen. 3 months later, the scent of industrial-grade detergent and fish market was a distant memory, replaced by silk and the faint, cold scent of Minu's cologne. Gabriella stood next to him at a prominent charity event, her sleek, dark gown a stark contrast to the glittering crowd, yet perfectly matching the expensive tailoring of his suit. She was not merely present, she was placed. Her posture was confident, born not of wealth but of earned consequence. The other guests, the lieutenants, the rivals, they all looked at her, no longer seeing a shadow of the help, but the silent, trusted matriarch who had secured Yejin and saved the boss from ruin. Her family's future was untouchable, her position unassailable. She was the moral steel at the heart of the Minu Empire, the invisible maid made powerfully, visibly real. She had traded her coat for a crown, securing both her family's legacy and her own terrifying, new destiny.